All right, welcome to the show. We have our friend Ashley Massie, who's the founder and principal consultant of Momentum Human Resources Consulting, where she brings a wealth of real world and multi industry experience to every client partnership. A certified HR and project management professional, Ashley has held director level roles and led teams across diverse corporate environments. In 2019, she took a leap of faith, leaving the corporate world to launch her own fractional HR practice. Since then, she has grown her team, honed her experience, and developed a transparent menu based model for HR operations and advisory services. Known for her ability to train, develop, and advise employees and leaders at all levels, Ashley is passionate about delivering practical, people first solutions that drive business success. Momentum Elite HR Team, no full time costs. At Momentum HR Consulting, we provide they provide fractional HR advisory and operational support based on their 7 foundational pillars. No subscriptions as your business evolves. Their seasoned HR team work alongside you to deliver adaptable solutions backed by trackable insights. Right?
Yes.
So, welcome to the show, Ashley. This is our very first episode.
Yes. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I know that was a mouthful, but I appreciate the warm intro. Long story short is that, we like to, momentum, as we've honed in on our services model, we basically have developed a model where there's not a lot of commitment. We're very flexible with our clients, so if people just need that on the fly spot, calling you when you need you, we're there. But then we also have clients that will outsource their full HR department to us, but we don't want people to feel like they're locked in or committed. So we have a very flexible pricing model, as well as a la carte options and things like that. So that's kind of what that snippet was for.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. So,
but yeah, I can tell you a little bit more about the pillars. The I think so. There's a lot of misconceptions about HR. I think so. If you ask a professional what is HR, they're probably going to tell you a couple of things, right? They're probably going to tell you, one, that HR is who gives me my paycheck. HR does my benefits open enrollment. They're the police. They tell me what I need to do. And also, that's who I go talk to if I have a problem. I mean, that's kind of the gist of what I think a lot of people would say if you ask them what their idea of HR is, right?
yeah.
But I think that people don't realize that there's so much more to HR, and a lot of it has to do with compliance. And I think that some people think, well, I'll just worry about it if something happens. They kind of take a reactive approach. But the 7 foundational pillars are operational infrastructure and processing. So that is your day-to-day operations of HR. Hiring people, terminating people, administering their benefits, running their, making sure they get paid, all of that kind of stuff. But there is a lot of compliance components in that as well, especially for small business owners, where they just don't know what parameters they need to be, what the best practices are. Human resources compliance is another one that's very broad, but there's so many things that fall under that in terms of policy and law and those kind of things. And then, of course, engagement and benefits. Those are kind of the lifeblood. Those are things that are in addition to the paycheck that you earn, right? What engages an employee to stay at a company? Do you have benefits that would get them to want to stay with your company? And then, of course, the one that nobody really likes, but employee performance and relations. I think just when you have a bunch of people in a building together with all kinds of diverse backgrounds and come from different walks of life, there's going to be at some point conflict or people who are underperforming, and a lot of business owners, especially growing businesses, don't know how to react to those situations. Mergers and acquisitions. I mean, that one's a little isn't applicable to all businesses necessarily, right? But at some point, they're in a life cycle of a company. You could be in a situation where you're either looking to sell, you're headed to retirement, or maybe you want to grow and expand and buy other businesses and bring them into the fold. Workplace safety is a big one. Again, that one is not necessarily applicable to, or it's heavier in certain industries, obviously, like construction or healthcare or any kind of job that has a lot of physical or machinery involved. But there's still workplace safety elements in every single environment. And then lastly is resource management. Again, do you have the right people in the right places? Are you running too lean? Are you running too full? And of course, recruitment falls in that category. Yang, you know. But there's also there's variables of that as well in talent acquisition, which is not just, hey, outsource it to a hiring agency, or are we doing the right things internally to source our own candidates? But there's also succession planning. Are there people living inside of our organization that could fill these roles? So
Yeah.
that's just to give you guys kind of a broad overview of the pillars. But of course, there's so much more that could go. You could go very in depth for some of these pillars, but I think that kind of paints a little bit of a picture on kind of, you know, what components really actually do fall under HR besides just hiring and paying people and things of that nature.
Yeah. So to clarify, Momentum HR has seven pillars that their business is based off of, and she just kind of went over the 7 different areas that they're able to serve and offer services for clients. Right.
Correct.
Yes. And we'll kind of have more episodes where we go in depth in various categories and various topics. But for today, just wanted to just introduce Ashley, talk about what she does and the value that she can bring for clients. And let's go over just a few topics today. And mainly I wanted to kind of cover some evergreen topics that HR just professionals can always maybe have some refreshers on, or things that are important. And especially for business owners that maybe aren't as knowledgeable within HR, right? If there's any things that they should be on the lookout for, like especially like compliance, so for if they get audited and, so they know what to do or who to reach out to, things like that. But then also wanted to talk about some timely topics, right? Things that are going on right now with the new administration, some laws are changing, right? So and sometimes it's hard to keep up with all the things that are changing related to HR. So I wanted to kind of talk about some of those topics as well. So let's start with some just general good HR advice, or just some good general HR things, right? That people should be aware of or constantly be thinking about, so that they don't get audited or they don't get in trouble, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you're right, Yang. That compliance bucket is really a big one, right? I think that sometimes HR is seen as like we're not a cost generating revenue center, right? So sometimes people don't really think like, oh, how do we bring value? Sometimes we're bringing value just in risk mitigation, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of times it's, hey, let us prevent you from getting into a lawsuit later, a lot of times. So what I want to focus on just at a high level is really those practices of onboarding someone, because everything starts with who you bring into your organization from a liability standpoint, right? Okay. So some key things that I think businesses want to think about when they're going through that process. I'll focus on interviewing a different day because I do think that interviewing is huge in terms of trying to make sure that you know exactly who you're hiring. But then there's some other things just in the pre-employment process of vetting an individual coming into your organization that you really want to focus on, because it will give you some insight into and help you mitigate some risk. So for one, and especially this is really big in small businesses, because I think small businesses start to just hire, and they're hiring a lot of times like, I know a guy, and we'll just bring him into the organization. And they think, well, so-and-so referred him, he must be fine. And they don't go through those checks and those balances. And then before they know it, they let that slide for someone they knew, and now they're letting it slide for someone they don't know, right? So background checks for sure are huge, because I think you get a lot of insight. But I also do believe in second chances, right? I'm not saying that everybody with a background shouldn't be hired. You know, I think it's circumstantial. But I think that's where you need to lean on like a professional and get that guidance. What do you think? Is this someone you would bring into your organization? Why or why not? Secondly, would be drug screening. There's a lot of, this is a really hot topic right now with marijuana becoming legal in some states.
Yep.
Do we or don't we care about marijuana, right?
Yeah. So is that more of a company preference thing? Because I know some companies do drug screen, some companies don't, right?
Yeah,
So,
I would say that like a lot of large corporations, probably it's a no tolerance policy, just because they probably have more risk, right? Like there's more moving parts and people to consider. What I am seeing with some smaller companies is they're doing sort of what I call like a hybrid model. And what I usually recommend to people is I would not blanket say I would not test anyone, because I think that there are certain positions where you kind of have to, like people who are driving vehicles should probably, you're reducing the risk of them driving under the influence.
yeah.
Especially in a company vehicle, or even on company time is becoming a big topic right now, right?
Yeah.
Like, and then the second one is people who are in safety sensitive positions.
Yep.
If you're operating machinery, if you're climbing up on roofs, things, again, that is not a situation where you would want someone impaired. But there is, go ahead.
Is that something that they would have in their policy ahead of time when they're hiring, so people are aware? So are there
Yes,
situations
absolutely.
where they may not, or and then I guess since we're talking about that,
Yeah.
tell me about like what somebody should do. Let's just say they passed their initial drug screening, they got the job, but then now they're having some issues at work, and then you have a feeling like they became, they're under the influence or
Yeah.
something, right? So then what do you do in that situation?
Yeah, so some companies have adopted what they call reasonable suspicion testing. This is a tricky area though, because it's a fine line between really believing there's an issue and calling that out and sending someone for a random drug screen and accusing them wrongly,
Yeah.
right? Where they could come back on you as the organization and say, "Oh, I feel wrongly accused," of,
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah, or
It can
discriminated on or
sour
something.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can sour that employer-employee relationship rather quickly, especially if you send the person, they test and they're negative. They're like, really? But if you are going to implement something like that, if it is something that you absolutely want to reserve the right to do as a company, there needs to be some pretty significant training. So I typically recommend that anyone who's in a role that could be that person making that decision, so in other words, like a supervisor or someone, that they take a reasonable suspicion training, so that they know and are very aware of what to look for of someone under the influence. Another thing that I use with a lot of my clients is a checklist. And I typically say that you need more than one person making that assessment of that person, right? Two different people putting eyes on them. So what I've done in the past is I've actually had managers call me and we walk through it together and we look at that checklist and I ask them questions that prompt like certain things about their behavior or their look or their smell or their whatever it is, things that they're inhibiting. And then if we both collectively decide that there's enough on that checklist, then we can send them. And then that checklist is kind of your backup if that person challenges you.
Okay.
The employee challenges you. Yeah. So, yeah, you do have, as an organization, you do have control over that. But you do have to be very clear in your policies up front with the employee that you have reserved the right to do that, and that could happen to them at any time. And just like you said, you were talking about evergreen. It's funny that you use that term because we use that a lot with what we call an evergreen release. So like we're talking about different checks that you want to do on people.
Yeah.
We always suggest too that you get an evergreen release of those checks, meaning it's not just telling them you're going to check this as a contingency to hire them. You're telling them I can check these things at any time during employment.
Okay. Yeah. Just letting the employee know that, hey, we're going to drug screen you to hire, but then also it could happen just throughout your employment with us.
Correct. Yeah. That way there's no surprises to the employee. You're within your complete legal parameters if you do send them for random testing. And also you don't have to go back and get like a release every single time you want to do some kind of check.
Yeah. So just since we're on the topic of compliance and just kind of risk mitigation, are there any other areas that HR brings value to the company where they can help save the company money or protect the company in other ways? So what other areas would HR be?
Another really big one is safety.
Okay.
And why I say that is, so most organizations, if they have safety sensitive positions, they probably are checking some boxes. They've probably got workers' comp insurance. They've probably got, certain coverage levels in their general liability or EPLI insurance that, will protect the company. But for a lot of those, especially service-based providers like construction and where they're delivering to an end user client, that client is probably going to ask them for certain parameters in the vetting process for them to get on their vendor lists. So some of the things they look at, right, are their safety record. They look at, there's things, and we can go into this more in depth on a different call, but there's things they look at, right, called like an EMR rating, which is your experience modifier rating. So how they calculate that rating is they take incidents that have happened, right? OSHA log, recordable incidents that have happened in your organization, coupled with missed work days for any of those individuals. And there's a calculation. And the problem for smaller employers is that percentage decreases because it's divided by the number of employees you have. So for some smaller organizations, they could have one incident and it could put their modifier, their rating at a place where they can get ousted for contracts, right?
Okay.
So then it's really important that you have the right plan in place and the right person or persons guiding you through those claims, the claims management piece of it. So like from the second an employee has an incident, you want to intervene to try to reduce it ever becoming a recordable injury if it's not supposed to be, from it ever becoming a workers' comp if it's not supposed to be, and mitigating those risks, those missed work days. All of those things save companies tons of money in their insurance premiums and open the door to better contracts if they have a good rating. So that's a pretty big one.
So does that usually fall under HR or is that fall under safety, like with a safety
It's
team?
it's usually both. If you're at a larger organization, you probably have a safety person in house working alongside HR,
Hmm.
because you have to remember that safety person's job is really to look at things like physical OSHA requirements of the facilities and the work sites. Their job is also to make sure that they're checking all the boxes for like certain required certifications and trainings. But their job isn't always to like keep track of all those like, training. Like they're going to pass that off typically to a more administrative function of the company. But they might be there when an incident occurs to write up an incident report, to be on site or on the scene of an incident. But once that employee, it becomes like there's a work injury, let's say, or it's medical related, they're going to pass that off to HR because it becomes, now you know too much about this employee's medical history. So
Yeah.
you want that to remain in a pretty confidential department, and you've got HIPAA parameters and things of that nature.
Hmm.
So then you want someone who doesn't have a conflict of interest. Like sometimes the safety person is working very closely with these like foremen, and they have a vested interest to get the person back to work, because it can hurt the job production and things of that nature, which can decrease revenue and all of those parameters. So they tend to sometimes not look at it from the viewpoint of HR, where we look at it as like, yes, that's important. We have the same goal. However, we also have the goal of making sure that this employee is protected.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So HR works as a strategic partner with safety, and
Yeah.
then if a company is using it properly, it could work in conjunction and really at the end of the day help save the company money and time and prevent additional risk, right?
Absolutely. And another reason why I think it's good for safety and HR to work together, or to have like more than one person dealing with these, is you kind of want that collective decision making, right? We all agree that this was first aid. We all agree this, we can give them these light duties to mitigate missed work days. We all agree they're not ready to come back to work, whatever it is, right? Like then you
Hmm.
have more than one person making those big decisions.
Yeah, yeah. Sounds good. And I have some more questions about like how HR partners with other particular groups, but I guess we'll kind of save that for a future episode,
Yeah, that's,
right?
we can get into that.
Because a company that's employing HR and utilizing HR properly, pretty much anything related to people, they should have their hands in, right? Whether it's
Absolutely.
safety or employee relations or succession planning, recruiting, all that kind of stuff, right? So just kind of switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about like things that are current, right? So since we're
Sure.
talking about kind of safety issues, we're kind of since we're talking about things that could happen like on site, right? Um, so I have a question for you. So then, what happens if you're at the warehouse and or at the, we'll say, a chemical plant or something like that, right? And ICE shows up, right? So
No, that's
what?
it's relevant. It's a relevant topic to
Yeah. So
our
what do
current.
you do? What do you like legally, bound to do or not don't have to do, or what are things that you can do to, protect employees and stuff like that, right?
Absolutely. So the very first one is, if ICE shows up, they have to have a warrant, but it's not like a typical warrant, right? It's not a warrant like you show up to my house, or I get pulled over for a speeding ticket and they have probable cause to search my car.
Hmm.
It is a very specific type of warrant that they have to have. It has to be signed by a very specific department. It's not just any judge. It has to be someone in immigration,
Okay,
right?
so it has to be signed by an immigration judge.
Yes.
Okay.
And I don't have the specific. I can get it to y'all. We could talk about it on a different. And if anyone asks you, I have the list of like certain judgeships that are allowed to issue those. The other one is too, when they show up, you as the employer, as the company representative, you have every right to ask them for the proper credentials as well. So in other words, like, it can't just be like HPD knocking on your door saying, do you have any, let me talk to these people, do you have any illegal immigrants working for you? It has to be, again, the government agency. It has to be an ICE official. It cannot just be whoever. And you are within your rights to ask for those credentials as well. So those are two big key things. The third thing is, let's say they have both of those things. Everything looks in order. Now they want to talk to specific individuals, right? Like, I want to talk to Jose Morales, right, in the warehouse. So with the warrant, that could get them into the warehouse, but that doesn't mean that you have to go point at that employee and tell them exactly who they are. It is their job to then do their homework and find that employee. Right?
Okay.
So if they find them, great in their search. If they don't, they don't.
What if they ask you, like, where is Ashley? Right?
You don't, I mean, you say, they should be in XY department. That's the department they work in. But if they've moved around, gone to lunch, gone to the bathroom, whatever, that's, you know, you can't police what people do 24 hours of their, or, you know, their entire workday.
Yeah.
But I would say one thing you do want to make sure and do, because it will go in your favor if it goes any further, like if there is any further investigation, is to be nice and polite, right?
Yeah.
I mean, still be cooperative, be polite, but do ask those questions, ask for those things, credentials and warrants, and you know, happy to show you around, but I don't have to like answer every question you have. The warrant only gets them physically into the location.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So
Well, so this is with the assumption that all of your employees do have their papers, they are legally, you know, authorized to work. Yeah.
Right.
So then if they show up, it's because they have, I guess, some other concerns about them?
They
or
might
what-
have
what-
reasonable cause, or they were tipped off by someone potentially. A
Okay.
lot of times. So, like, for instance, you could have an ex-disgruntled employee, right? Somebody who got terminated from your organization, you know, parted ways on not so great terms with you in their mind. And then they are whistleblowing, whether it's founded or not. You know, they could just be making this like assumption. And so it could have been reported by an external party, which is what gave ICE cause to come in the first place. But it could not be founded at all. And in which case, they come in, they do their search, they ask for your I-9. We'll get to the I-9s in a second. But, and all that checks out and it's all clear and you're all good, then that's really it usually.
So
Right.
do they go directly to the person that they're looking for, or do they go to you to ask for your documentation, your I-9, you know, compliance document?
It depends on the audit, right? So there's kind of a couple different
Do you have any
scenarios.
stories of this actually happening?
I do have a story.
Or that you can share, you know, yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I actually don't have a story of well, I do. Okay. So it actually predates what's all going on right now too. This happened about 10 years ago, which is interesting, right? Because these audits, even the I-9 audits, were actually a lot less prevalent before now,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
However, if you work in an industry that employs a lot of immigrant workers, you're going to have the radar on you. It is what it is, right? So warehouse environments, farming, I mean, there's just different industries, right, that lend themselves to hiring immigrants. Now, yes, I'm not telling people go and have illegal workers, working for you, and then ICE shows up and hide them. I mean, that's
Yeah.
not what we're saying. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you want to try to do your due diligence as an organization to make sure that these people do have the authorization to work in the United States. They don't have to be full citizens.
Yeah.
They can be permanent residents. They can be here on visas. They can. I mean, there's a number of different things that make it legal for them to work in the
Yeah.
United
Yeah.
States,
Like
and that's
H-1B.
what
Yeah.
your job is to prove, right? And that is what ICE is looking for if they show up at your organization,
Just
right?
that they have the proper documentation.
Right. So what's interesting is this actually predates E-Verify, my story.
Okay. That's a long
E-Verify
time
was
ago.
actually, yes.
Yeah.
Or predates it being really like widely used,
Yeah.
right? So E-Verify, obviously, for those that don't know what it is, it was put in place as an extra layer rather than just checking the IDs. You're checking against people's social security numbers, essentially, to make sure they're like real people. Because back in the day, people would use fake social security, fake IDs and things to get work. So it kind of cut down on some of those things. But so this organization was employing immigrant workers. They thought very legally, like they were doing their checks and balances of checking IDs and filling out their I-9s, right? I mean, that was, hey, I've looked at their IDs, everything checks out, they have authorization according to their IDs, we're good, right? Well, ICE came in initially to just do an I-9 audit. They were not looking into specific individuals. They didn't have a warrant to walk the warehouse, any of that stuff. They were just asking for the I-9s. After reviewing the I-9s, they realized that like a lot of these people were on, permanent resident. So they realized there was a lot of immigrant workers in this organization. So they did kind of a spot audit on the social security numbers themselves, this again before you verify. And what they found was that there were actually a few workers who the social security number was valid, the ID was valid, so the organization had filled out the I-9 correctly. However, it wasn't actually the person who was working there. So that person was using someone else's identity to work there.
Yeah. So they're passing themselves. It's like identity fraud. They're passing themselves off as somebody else.
Yes, except that in a lot of cases it was knowing to the person. Let's say it's an older individual who's like retiring or something, and now they've said, here, to their younger, let's say, son, cousin, nephew, whatever, here's my ID, go use it because you're not a citizen, you're not authorized, use my social security number to go get this job, and then that way you're paying taxes, you're a taxpayer, I mean, they're going to take out payroll taxes and all that, and then they would work out deals where these people would pay a small fee to that individual to use their social security number.
Yeah. So then now with E-Verify, like, is that still common or could that still happen?
So E-Verify, though, is still going to show that it's a real person, right? I mean, it's still going to show that social security is valid. So absolutely there are still ways around E-Verify if the person has the right identification. However, if you have a trained eye, you as an HR professional, as whoever in that organization that is, hiring and reviewing those IDs, you should be able to catch some kind of discrepancy and question whether or not it's valid.
Is there a way for you as the HR person on site to be able to be like 100% sure? Like, let's say you have a suspicion that they're using a fake ID with somebody else's social, right? Like, what do you do from there?
So let's say that, because Social Security cards, even permanent resident cards, don't have a picture. I mean, that's not a pictured ID. That is
Yeah.
a number that you're verifying, right? And that is one form of the several forms they ask for on a 99, right?
Yeah.
So that one's a little bit harder because there's no like picture to verify it against, right?
Yeah.
But let's say there's secondary ID, which has to be like a passport or a driver's license or something with generally a photo on it. If something about that doesn't match up, it would be pretty hard for someone to have the same name as that social security number that matches that license and it look like exactly like they look. I mean, you would have to have a fake ID,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm assuming, right? Because
Right. So she would either be looking for it to be a fake ID,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
again, there's certain things that IDs have, and of course every state varies slightly, that really make it valid. Holograms and certain things about the ID, right?
Uh-huh.
But then also there are people that will try to pass the other individual off as themselves, and the picture just doesn't look like them.
Yeah.
And you can absolutely call any of those things out
Yeah.
and ask for another form of ID. Like, so in
Okay.
other words, let's say they gave you a driver's license and you're like, this does not look like you, or this license doesn't look real or valid. You can prompt them for additional identification.
Okay. Yeah. And then let's just say they got a really good fake ID, right? And then it passed, and it's hard to pass the eye test, and then they get employed, right? Mm-hmm. It's just a honest mistake, right? And then ICE comes, they do the audit, find out that you're employing an illegal immigrant. Then what?
So if you're doing E-Verify, that's why I always suggest that people do it, because if you're doing E-Verify, they're going to check and they're going to see that that social was valid, and the I-9 was filled out correctly. And in that case, and again, it is also how the company responds. If you respond like defensive and nervous, like then probably you knew. If you're really like, I had no clue, and you're very open about showing them those records, they'll realize that that was just a person who kind of slipped through the cracks.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not going to, I mean, typically it can go one of two ways, but there are some organizations that are getting fined or, legal ramifications for hiring illegal immigrants, but they're normally people who knowingly are doing it. Whereas most incidences we're seeing, because there's a lot of like misinformation out there, like especially, so we live in Houston, Texas, right? So we're a hotbed right now for ICE. And you hear on the news, right? We're hearing it all the time about these raids. They raided this place, they raided that place. But what they don't tell you, because it's sensationalized, is a lot of times they're not going after the organization, or if they are, quote unquote, going after the person, they might find one or two people in that warehouse that aren't here illegally, but typically there's not going to be a whole lot of immediate like action taken. Like, it's not like they take them straight from the warehouse and put them on a bus and send them back. Now,
that's how it seems like in the news.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
there are some. I'm not saying there aren't those instances. There are some situations where they are skipping due process, and that is not okay. However, there are situations where they're going through due process. So what I like to tell employers and organizations is, if that happens, like let's hope in a million years that it doesn't. But if it happens and it happened unknowingly, you did not know that person was working your organization illegally, and they get, if that's a valuable employee and you really like this person, I mean, and we all have a heart, right? I think we're compassionate people. We want to see people succeed. You can, as the employer, intervene on their behalf and talk with an immigration attorney, and make sure that you start to go down the path of getting them due process. Right?
Okay.
I mean, it's entirely up to you as an organization if you want to front that expense, or if you want to somehow help them out with that expense, or recommend them to an immigration, whatever you're comfortable with. But I think getting an immigration attorney involved very early is also helpful, because it can get them the due process that they need, and it can get them sometimes temporary orders to stay in the United States and continue working for you. You know, or get that work visa expedited or whatever, right? I know that it's getting a little slightly more difficult to do some of those things, and things are getting stalled in some of the offices regarding those things. But those departments are still there. They're still intact. There are still people every day that are getting renewed for their work visas, getting renewed for their, you know, like getting extensions on staying while their paperwork is going through. But yes, generally most of those people have some sort of legal representation. You know?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure there's a lot that we can kind of talk further about this, because it's just kind of a hot topic right now.
For sure.
Yeah. But what's kind of the best way, that just general recommendations that you would say for people to look up or know about, just so they can kind of keep up with this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so for my clients, we set up a portal for all of our clients, like where we share it so that they can see things, and we do a compliance dashboard. So we use that dashboard to kind of put out content to them as a whole. Like I-9 affects everyone, right? So that would be something we would probably put out on all of our client portals. And then there's other things that, like, if it's just specific to their type of industry or something, or let's say they have like annual compliance reporting that we want to keep on their radar, we would put it up on their compliance dashboard. But if you aren't working with someone like a consultant or an agency, or you don't have that in-house HR resource, there are resources out there. One that I usually tell people is, if you are a company who offers benefits, like to your medical healthcare benefits to your employee, 9 times out of 10, your broker, your insurance broker, will have some kind of resource, generally free to you, that will give you some of those compliance updates. Like one example is Mineral HR is a really popular one that is a resource tool for HR related things, and a lot of companies can have free access to it through vendors.
Awesome. And then of course they can call you.
Or call me.
Yeah, if they need help. If they don't have the time to kind of do it themselves, have a good consultant that you can call, or somebody that
Absolutely.
kind of at your fingertips that you can ask questions for. Yeah, great.
Absolutely.
Well, we're gonna have more of these, right? And then there'll be other topics that we'll kind of do more deep dives on.
Absolutely.
So, first off, thank you for taking the time to come on, and it's great to have you to kind of share what you do with everybody. But yeah, if there's other topics that you guys like to hear about, let us know. We'd be more than happy to kind of dive deeper into these things, and kind of like how we did today, we'll have other just timely things that kind of going on right now, like especially with like automation and AI and things like that. So we'll have other topics, and we'll have Ashley on again to help.
Absolutely, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, give us some more info. Well, so with that, we'll sign off, and thank you once again, Ashley, for coming on, and we look forward to hearing from you again.
All right, thanks, Yang. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, bye.
Bye.